Hi, everyone. Welcome to an episode of Change Starts With Us Ohio. Um, as our prisons are going through the holidays and then through the spring and summer, our prisons are very high on suicidal rates during those months. And this is a statistics from 2016, I believe. 5 suicides by Southern Ohio Correctional Facility that year. That's one institution. So I don't know how many has happened since then. I'm going to read you some of the stories on the one from Ohio. It says on July 1st, the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility lost another officer. Okay, this is an officer to suicide. If you're continuing counting, that makes 5 officers who have committed suicide from all prisons. That year. Officers, it's usually, it seems like it's usually the decent ones that actually fall in this category because they feel so guilty for the way people are being treated and things that they have to see. And remember, too, Southern Ohio Correction Facility does the death penalty. So it's got to be hard, you know, just in that prison. At Marion, the time I was at Marion, the 10 years at Marion, there was 2 people that I remember committed suicide. One committed it, I was real good friends with. He went to segregation the day before, no, about a week before he was going to go home. He bought a dog already from the institution that he was going to take home. But the day before he was to leave, he committed suicide. He hung himself in segregation, which is kind of difficult because of the officers that are supposed to make rounds on a regular basis. And we never know if they're really doing what they say they're doing. But to get some of the good information, they also have training for it, but you could go to suicide prevention. And I'm going to read some of the segments. It says, as the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death after accidents for people ages 10 to 34. Can you imagine a 10-year-old even thinking about suicide? In 2016 in the United States, nearly 45,000 people died by suicide, and the rate of suicide has increased every year since 2006. An estimate of 1.3 million adults attempted suicide each year, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. More than 1 in 5 people have died by suicide, had expressed the suicide intent. Men are more than 3 times more likely than women to take their lives. Firearms are the most common method of suicide used in about half of all suicide. I lost a real good friend. I ran a program as our first president. Apparently, the way she committed suicide was through a gun. It's hard for me to believe that she did it through a gun, but what I'm reading now, it seems like that's how more and more people do commit suicide. Okay, yet suicide is preventable. Knowing the risk factors and recognizing the warning signs for suicide has helped prevent suicides. Risk factors, warning signs, and protective services and factors. Suicide is linked to mental disorders, particularly depression and alcohol use disorders. And the strongest risk factor for suicide is previous suicide attempts. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center defines risks, protective factors, and warning signs. Risk factors are characteristics that make it more likely that an individual will consider attempt or die by suicide. Warning signs indicates the immediate risk of suicide. Preventive factors are characteristics that make it less likely that individuals will consider attempt or die by suicide. Risk factors for suicide, and then we're going to just open this up for discussion, but Certain events and circumstances may increase risk, not in particular order except first one. Previous suicide attempts, a history of suicide in the family, substance abuse, misuse, mood disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, access to lethal means, firearms in a home, losses and other events, for example, the breakup of a relationship or death of um, academic failures, legal difficulties, financial difficulties, and bullying, history of trauma or abuse, chronic physical illness, and including chronic pain. That's really a lot to think about. But there's classes that people can take to be a counselor for suicide. It would be neat for our group to also, some of us, to go through it because we deal with those who are in prison and those coming out of prison. Already, I believe this year there was 3 suicides in the Ohio prisons. I think that's what I heard from someone that worked for the DRC. But we don't have to lose these people. If our officers were trained better, maybe, and I don't know what the training is, I think a lot of it could be prevented. But prisoners can't rely on them, and they're afraid to say anything to them because they repeat stuff. They harass our people. Some, not all, don't forget. I'm not talking about every officer, but a big portion of them do, which pushes people more into a deep, deep depression and anxiety disorders. I remember a guy at Grafton who I was fairly close to. I mean, I didn't kick it with him every day, but we got along real good. They found him dead in his cell in the morning. He sliced his wrist. And he did not have a super long sentence. I think he had like maybe 3 years left to do. And he's been down like 10 years at that point. It was like he had like 3 to 10 or something back in those days. And he got flopped for the last time. And right after that, he just, had enough and he put an end to his life. And it really makes me wonder why we don't have a system that's set up for suicidal prevention more so in our prison systems and in our youth facilities. Do we care that little for these people that suicide is okay? That they don't deserve counseling? It's kind of sad too that we as citizens have really become so vicious towards others. We judge people, which pushes them into suicide. There's just, it's sad, that a lot of times Americans and people, not just the Americans, will push people there, threatening, harassing, bullying, and what are we doing about it? We won't stick up for people like that, which we need to start doing. Now, I have no problem myself, because I've been bullied since I've been out, but, I'm mature enough that I can handle it. But some people cannot. When you sit there and bash people that was down for sexual offenses, murder, assault, whatever it may be, threaten them, intimidate them, pushes people into a deep depression and fear sometimes. And fear and depression will cause you to push yourself into suicide. So who is to blame for that? Is our schools trained for their students? Is our juvenile centers trained for their young men and women? And what about the adult prison system for the men and women? Are they trained? I think they go through some training, but I don't think people take it really that serious, that people really get the help that they need. If you have a loved one that is very depressed, that is possibly suicidal, get the help for them. Don't be too embarrassed. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. That could save a life, and a life of someone you love. If somebody else comes up to you and says that that thing about committing suicide, take it serious as well. They may not be the loved one, but take it serious. If you have to call for help for him or her, go the extra mile. Let's make 2021, very powerful and be willing to help others instead of sitting by and watching them suffer. Everybody, you have yourself a great day, and thank you for listening.